Hey guys, thanks for joining us for our new video series, A Photographic Moment. It's where we're going to take a specific photography related topic and discuss it and talk about it within the realm of a short video clip. Today's clip is going to be exposure compensation. So come and join us. I think you're going to have a good time with this. Okay, so what is exposure compensation? Well, exposure compensation is a device on your camera that allows you to override what the camera normally wants to do. First of all, we need to look at how the camera actually reacts to light. Every camera, virtually every camera anyway, will have at least three metering systems built within it. There's matrix, there's center weighted, and there's spot metering in there. And they all have their little bit different functions and uses. And but fundamentally what they all do is that they want to tell the camera to give an exposure that moves everything toward what's called a middle tone value. And what I mean by this is let's use a real simple example of this. If you have, say, like a white wall, and you put your camera on any of the modes other than manual, put it on aperture priority, shutter, auto, program, whatever, and you point it at that white wall and you just let the camera do what it wants to do, and when it takes that photograph, that white wall will turn gray on the capture. Okay, the same thing will happen if you do it on a black wall. You point it at the black wall, it's going to shift its exposure to the point to where that black wall will look gray. And it will do this. You can experiment with that and try it yourself, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And that's just the way these things work. That's just how they work. Now, if your background is pretty much all a middle tone value anyway, then that'll work just fine. But when you get into those extremes of lighting, you know, like snow or a beach or somewhere where there's a really dark background or something like that, it can really skew and throw off your camera's exposure. So your exposure compensation allows you to override that. And you do that by using that little plus or minus button that you'll find on your camera. Now, sometimes it's on top of the camera, sometimes it's on the back of the camera. And each camera has a little different way of navigating around, you know, how to actually use it and find it and all those kinds of things. And you just have to kind of figure out how to do that on your own camera. But basically what happens is that when you press that plus or minus button, you'll see a scale that'll come up. And there'll be a 0 in the middle, and a plus 1, 2, 3 to one side, and a minus 1, 2, 3 to the other side. And it usually always defaults to 0. That means it's going to give you a middle tone value. But if you want to add light to your exposure, like that white wall, you want that white wall to be white and not gray, then you need to kind of move that cursor over toward that plus value. You need to add light to your exposure. So when your camera tries to take that picture, it's going to want to set its exposure for the middle tone. It'll look at that, it'll evaluate what you have set for the exposure compensation, and it'll change its exposure to give you what you want it to be, not necessarily what it wants to do. Same thing, of course, applies to the black wall. If you want the wall to be more black as opposed to gray, then you're going to have to go down into the negative value on that scale. And what this does, it gives you the opportunity, gives you the ability to capture a scene the way you want it to look, not necessarily the way it actually looks visually, and not necessarily the way the camera is going to capture it or react to that light. We're going to, here in just a minute then, we're going to look at a real world situation to where exposure compensation comes into play, and you're going to be able to see how that actually works.
Let's look at a real world situation. Now this photograph that you're seeing up here actually represents what it would look like if you were standing there looking at this scene. The lighting is very harsh, it's very bright, very contrasty. It's not very appealing really if you just look at it. But understanding and knowing what the camera will do, let's just see what happens. We're just going to let the camera do what it wants to do. Let's see what the results are. Wow, a lot of difference, isn't there? We didn't do anything to the camera. We just let it do what it wanted to do, because it moved everything, as you can see, to a middle tone value. Created a whole lot more drama. Now we could play with this even more, and to see what happens if we move it into a negative value. We moved it to a -1 compensation, and we got even more drama. The lighting is basically the same between all three of these photographs. Nothing really changed except the exposure compensation value. And that is how you use this wonderful and powerful tool.